Hey, this is Mike Lindsay from Vital MX, and I'm guessing you've likely clicked on this video because of the title. It is probably the biggest story in our sport at the moment, and surprisingly, it does not come from the professional ranks, it comes from the amateur. At the 2022 Loretta Lynn's Amateur National, Monster Energy Star Yamaha Racing's Haiden Deegan's bike was claimed after the third moto of the 250B class by a rider by the name of Brennan Schofield. There's been a couple of interviews out with Brennan. We have our own, which you'll also see in this video, but we also wanted to take the time and opportunity to really try to get to the bottom of the story, interview all that we could find that were involved and were the key players in the bike claim situation from the beginning of the claim to the time that it was rescinded, and hopefully clear up any missed stories or just exaggerations that were involved. It's very difficult when you get this many people involved in a story because there are many sides to it, and then at the end there is the truth. Sometimes it is very hard to find because, again, so many of these stories, they will have points where they are not matching up. There are points that they perfectly match up. Some people agree with each other, some people don't. Ultimately, that's why we try to compile all of them, though, so you, the viewer, can listen to each party and try to find out where the truth really lies. Our goal with this, again, was to clear up some major accusations that were proposed, such as accusations against Donnie, Luce, against Yamaha, against the Deegans. And when we say clear up, that might be that they're true, that might be that they're false. Also things against Tim Cotter from MX Sports, Brennan himself, engine guy, many of these things, Matt Walker. And then that's why we try to speak to all these parties involved. This is going to be part one of what will likely be a three-part series. The first one is the interview that we did with Brennan Schofield, which is sort of a follow-up to Tyler Livesay's. A lot of it is based on that conversation, us breaking it down a little bit deeper. So if you've seen Tyler's interview, everything in this interview with Brennan at the beginning will make sense. If you haven't, it might feel like we're a little too precise on a few things. You may still want to listen to Tyler's to get the wide grasp, but since that one already existed, we really wanted to break down what Brennan said and try to get confirmation on certain aspects, who was dealt with, when, where, and why. Everybody that was interviewed for this feature and the upcoming ones were all based around their timelines, whether they were involved from the moment the claim started or if they were involved with the riders prior to the claim being initiated, and what their firsthand experiences were in terms of were they in the room, when, why, who'd they talk to. If they weren't in the room or weren't in the situation, we really just try to omit those portions, as a lot of that is hearsay, and we wanted to get down to the nitty-gritty of what these people really experienced, saw, heard, and said. As we said, this first feature will have Brennan Schofield, the rider himself that claimed the bike. We also have an interview with Tim Cotter from MX Sports, and also one with Mike Burkeen, who is the AMA official. These three really dealt with the whole claim situation from start to end. The two officials in this matter will explain why the bike claim is handled as it is, kind of break down the rule, how the situation goes. We hear, of course, from Brennan on the whole situation. And we also spoke briefly to Brian Deegan about his involvement in the earlier part of the story. The next part you will see in part two will include Donnie Luce from Yamaha along with Matt Walker, as their timelines are right about the same in this story. They're each interviewed separately and again broken down against the timeline from our initial interview with Brennan. And then finally there will be a third and final piece which will be released tomorrow morning, which will have some comments that should clear up from Brennan's sponsor standpoint of view, the interaction with Yamaha that was claimed that may not actually exist, as we have found out, and just a few things to clear up a lot of mystery that goes down to, did someone, rig all this? Is it all a misunderstanding or what? We also spoke to Bobby Reagan. We spoke to multiple different people at MX Sports and other riders around the situation. In total, we have probably been on the phone for over the past few days for at least 30 to 35 hours. Lots of texts and emails trying to figure this all out. Brennan and Bobby Reagan's interviews over the phone, so they're just audio. Everybody else is Zoom related, so a little bit better quality there. The last thing we will touch on before we get into this feature is where our personal situation stands in dealing with this story. Very early last week, it was either late Sunday or early Monday after Loretta Lynn's, we were approached by a source with a story that we found to be quite crazy. It ended up actually coming out through Chris Cooksey. We were initially approached on it, explained all the details from the source who had gotten their story from Derek Harris, the rider's engine builder, Brennan's engine builder. After hearing the story, we initially reached back and said, look, we won't run something without all the counterclaims when it is this big of a claim, basically, in sense. We'd like to talk to the rider or his dad directly. Here's our contact number. We'd be more than happy to go forward with this interview. We were told that our information was passed on. As we talked to Brennan later, we found out it actually wasn't, and the source took the story onto the next outlet. So we're catching up on this a few days later, but doing what we originally set out to do by trying to get every party that was really involved's story and anyone that we could get to go on record. So we hope that this feature, over these next couple features, that, again, we shed some major light on what really, truly transpired there. At the end of the day, we don't know if you will find a complete resolution through all these stories. We do think it clears up a lot of misgivings and a lot of misunderstandings. And ultimately, we'd love to hear in the comments section what you think about this, if it changes your perspective, what is maybe shocking to you that comes out during this. So we're going to jump right into it with Mr. Brennan Schofield, and thank you for watching.
Hey, this is Mike Lindsay from Vital MX, and I have Brennan, and I'm really bad with names. So is it Schofield? How do I pronounce it? Because I'm great at butchering.
Yeah, Brennan Schofield.
Schofield. Okay. So, of course, I think you have been about the largest news story of the last week within our industry. As we have tapered out of Loretta Lynn's, a lot more information has come out, mostly in the story that you have done with Tyler Livesay. You did an interview with him, I think, about 2 or 3 days ago or so. For anybody that wants to check that out, that is actually in the link below this feature. Being that Brennan already spoke pretty much to the whole story with Tyler, we're not going to quite double over it. We're just more or less going to go through some of the details and what's happened since. So again, if you want to check out his original interview, hit it below. That'll give you better reference points for this interview. I imagine, though, most people that are going to watch this have probably already seen the original one. So I guess starting off for you, Brennan, is it was a few days afterwards when we finally seen some of this come out. Kind of what was it like after Loretta's for you to get to the point that you end up speaking to Tyler? What path did you think about after the situation, after it ended? Did you feel like you had to wait a couple days to kind of process what happened or figure out where you wanted to go next, or?
Yeah, so we left Loretta's Sunday morning, and everything was just kind of normal. We ended, Loretta's, and I dropped the claim and talked to a sponsor of mine who was kind of concerned about it and stuff, and we had everything straightened out, and everything seemed to be good, and we left Loretta, started driving to Walton, Ontario in Canada to go race the Transcan, and it was about like Sunday night, Monday, there was only a few Sunday, but I started getting like emails and texts and calls and DMs and follows and comments and stuff on my Instagram and everything about what happened at Loretta's. And I never thought it was going to, like, blow up this big. My intentions at the beginning were definitely not for this, but once everything happened, I kind of knew there was going to be some stuff going on after, but I didn't think it was going to get this big. But, yeah, so just a lot of questions and a lot of people trying to do interviews and things like that.
Yes, I know I originally got reached out to via source who had spoken to, I believe it's your engine builder, Derek Harris. So I've been approached with a story, I pretty much listened to the source for maybe about 20 minutes or so, lay out what had happened. But at the time, I believe that is very similar to maybe what Chris Cooksey had ended up with. I'm not sure if it was the same source or if it was Derek or what, but I've been run through a story, and we originally at the time were hoping to speak to you, so we sent back the contact info, but clearly that connection has now just happened now, so I am glad we are getting to speak to you. So what I'm really curious is the initial story, like I said, that Cooksey came out with. What I was curious is, from your standpoint, is Did any of what ended up coming out more third party trigger you to want to come forward more, or was that, was that expected that you thought it was going to come out like that, or did you want it to come from your own voice? Or
I mean, I think when there's things like this that happen, you're always going to have people kind of jump on it and try to be the first person to get out there and say something, which was him. He was the first one, and he did text me about it. I was just trying to hold off. I was trying to clear my head and, like, focus on the week at Walton and race, because that's like Loretta's 2.0 to me in Canada. So it's another big week of racing, and I didn't really want to have to do anything. But, yeah, so that came out. He did. I believe he did get his story from Derek.
Yeah.
Me and Derek were really close. We talk all the time. Our communication's good. And, yeah, I told Derek, I was like, you were there. He was the only one there the whole time with me, just because he was hanging around my camper all week at Loretta's, helping me and supporting me and stuff. But, so, yeah, most of that story was correct. I mean, there were some things like here and there, some things got missed out that only I knew, or, like little things. But, I mean, I didn't really worry about it. People are going to believe certain things, and people aren't going to believe stuff either way, no matter who it comes from. So, yeah.
Okay. So list of questions we're going to get into now. Basically, I listened to your whole interview with Tyler, and the majority of these are fairly chronological. So anybody that's listening to this is kind of going in the order of what you talked to Tyler about. When you guys spoke, you guys got pretty much straight into it that, you guys initially discussed, why you decided to do the claim, kind of how you prepared for it, and then the conversation went to you going to the office area to file the claim. So first question would be, did you go fully alone? Did your dad go with you at all? Did Derek go with you at all, or were you 100%? Did you just go up completely by yourself? And if so, why did you go by yourself?
Yep. So I got done that moto. I believe it was the 250B moto. And so I was in the 250B and 450B class, and Haiden was in 250B and Schoolboy 2. And Schoolboy 2 had a moto the next day. So I had to do my claim at the end of our moto that we were in together, which was 250B, which was Friday. So I had to do it after that moto. I couldn't do it Saturday when Deegan was done because I wasn't in his class. So the AMA rulebook says that you have to be there to do your claim or your protest or whatever you have to do in the AMA rulebook 30 minutes after the moto. So I had 30 minutes once I got done my moto. And, so I went back to my camper and I was just getting water and getting undressed and everything. And my dad was like, we were talking about the moto, and he's like, all right, well, I got to go get some water to wash the bike for the pressure washer. So my dad took off in the truck and went and got water. My mom was still up there watching our friend that had a moto after me. So I was at the camper by myself, and Derek came over. Like I said, he was hanging around my camper pretty much all week, just, communication, congratulating me. We're close, everything like that, doing motor work and stuff. So Derek came over. We're talking about how the moto went, how my bike was working. And I was like, dude, I got to go up and do this claim. I only have 30 minutes. And he brought his golf cart over to my camper. So I was like, do you mind if you take me out to the AMA office so I can do this claim? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I ripped up in the golf cart, walked into the office. He stayed outside. I walked into the office by myself, and that's when I did the claim. So I was there by myself in the office, but Derek had taken me up, and my dad was getting water. So, yeah.
And then you kind of answered my second question already. It was more for clarification. So I saw a lot of people go, oh, why didn't he place this claim after the final moto? You did place the claim after the final moto that you and Deegan were together, because that 250B, that was technically your third and final moto. And as you said, AMA rulebook does not place it where you could file the claim after Schoolboy 2 the next day because, you're not in that class. So that was your third moto. Okay.
Yep, right.
So you go in the office. So we had talked about, or you had talked about with Tyler, that you ended up speaking to Tim Cotter from MX Sports to file a claim. During this, did you end up speaking to any AMA officials during the process, or did the entire claim process solely go through Tim Cotter, or was there anybody else that was actually communicated with during the claim process?
Yeah, so it started with Tim Cotter. He was the first person that I talked to, and then when we went inside the building, the whole AMA staff team was there. So it just like the first person I talked to was Tim, and then it went to the AMA crew, and then Tim was involved in like little parts throughout the couple hours that it went on.
Okay. And then who'd you end up dealing with from AMA official side? I think in the interview, or in your interview, Ty, I think you said it was Mike. That would be, I believe, Mike Burkeen, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Mike.
Okay. Yeah. So what did they explain to you was the process here? Because I'm going to be talking to Burkeen, I believe, on Monday, and what we're going to clarify there is just how the process is supposed to go. Because again, I think there's And I heard it from your interview with Tyler. I think there is somewhat of confusion on how a bike claim protest actually works at Loretta's, who's responsible for it. So in that situation, what did Burkeen and AMA tell you? And, who handled the financial transaction with you?
Yeah, so, I can't remember how word for word the rule book goes. Exactly, but all I knew was just I had to walk up there with MSRP times 2 with the cash, hand it to AMA, and then they would just kind of deal with it from there. So that's all I worried about. But Mike and all the AMA staff and crew did an amazing job. They knew that I only knew what I was doing was just paying the money, and that's kind of what I was there for. So they walked me through everything and helped me out, and made sure I didn't have any questions and things like that. I can't even think of the girl's name that dealt with the money. I don't know if it was Lindsay or I'm not sure, but it was a female in there that kind of dealt with the money and counted it, and then handed it off to another AMA worker that counted it a second time. But it was mainly with Mike. He was really helpful. He was good.
Okay, so from your end, speaking of Mike Burkeen, the AMA staff, you feel like they all handled everything properly?
Yeah, no, they did a great job.
Cool. In speaking of your MX Sports, I know when you'd spoken to Tyler, there were some comments about how it was to deal with MX Sports and Tim Cotter. In the grand overview after, dealing with the whole situation, what was your opinion on that conversation with Tim? What do you feel like either was handled correctly or mishandled from your perspective?
Yeah, well, what I didn't know at the time was that Tim Cotter wasn't an AMA official, and I don't know. I thought he was. I thought he worked for the AMA. He was part of the AMA, but what he is an MX Sports promoter. So I guess what I'm saying is I shouldn't have been dealing with an MX Sports promoter. I should have been dealing with an AMA official from start to the end, but Tim was like in it for parts of the whole time. So yeah. Okay.
And then I believe, if I have this correct, the next step of that conversation after you filed the claim, was it they took possession of the bike, or was it that Brian was brought, to the trailer to speak with you, being Brian Deegan, I mean?
Yeah, so AMA sent a team down to the Deegan's camper and told them what was going on and told them that they were going to impound the bike after they got it ready. They had, they were allowed to get the bike ready for the race the next day, and then they were going to put stickers on the cases and seal it, and then they were going to claim the bike for the night in the impound. And, so the next part was that, and then I think they were kind of like, talking to them and getting the bike ready and like waiting for them to get it ready and everything while Brian Deegan came up and talked to me.
Overall, like I think you mentioned that you spoke to Brian, you believe, for around 3 minutes. How was Brian overall to deal with? Is it about what you would expected from, per se, a Deegan's bike claim? Do you feel like he overstepped his boundaries in how he spoke to you, or is it about what you expected, or how do you feel about that?
I wasn't expecting to talk to him at all. I was just in the room with the AMA team and staff, and Tim Cotter came in and told me to come into the back room with him and Brian Deegan. He had Brian in there waiting for me, and we were just going to talk about it. So, I went into the room there, and, obviously Brian was mad. I think anybody would have been mad about getting a bike claimed. he didn't say much. He just asked me why I was doing it and asked me if I was trying to defame them from YouTube, and just asked me like who was behind it, whose money, and why I was doing it. And Tim Cotter just sat there and kind of listened and asked the same.
Did Brian at any point interact? I'm kind of more clearing up just because, I've talked to quite a few people that were at the event. A rumor flown around was, did Brian end up interacting with anybody else from your camp, whether it be Derek, your dad, anyone else? No, was it only you and him that interacted?
Yeah, just me and Brian. That was it for that 30 minutes. He only talked to me, and then we never talked again, or he never talked to anybody on my side.
Okay. And then just to kind of follow up and clear up anything is, did anyone else related to that Star Racing organization, did anybody directly from their team end up approaching you at any time?
No, not from Star, but Donnie, Luce. I mean, if you want to say he has something to do with him, because he's the Yamaha USA guy. Donnie Luce is the only other person.
Yep. So he's Yamaha Blue Crew, basically amateur moto, ATV, and support program. So he's Yamaha employee. So that was going to be actually our next spot. So I believe you talked to Tyler that after the Brian situation, you guys go back to your respective camps. End up being later that evening is, I believe, when Matt Walker reached out to you to stop by his pit, and I believe you said that yourself, Derek, your father, ended up going over there. You guys were all on a golf cart together already, hanging out together. So you guys end up over there, and under Matt's tent, 5 chairs. So Matt's there, and he had Donnie Luce there when you arrived, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Cool. So who in that interaction, I believe you said, was it Luce that approached you first on like kind of why they sat you down, or was it Matt that was kind of first to speak on it?
Yeah, so it was Matt. We all sat down, and Matt kind of like the first thing he said was like, why in the world would you guys be doing this? You don't understand what you're doing, or you don't understand what you guys are getting yourself into, and this is an unspoken rule that nobody does. That it's going to affect me. Sponsors are going to hate it. I'm going to lose sponsors. And just kind of that, he kind of jumped straight to the point and used some words against my father, myself, and my motor guy, he was pretty mad about the whole situation. And Donnie just sat there and listened for a bit. And then Donnie started asking me some questions, just some basic questions of why I was doing it, whose money, who was behind it, and that we didn't understand what we were getting ourselves into again, and just some things like that.
Okay. Speaking of, because in this situation, like I said, Donnie is sort of the representation from Yamaha across these programs. Again, talking about rumors that's floating around, at any point were you offered a deal per se, some reason to drop it, whether it be cash, parts, bikes, anything? Did they offer you at any point anything to drop the claim, or was it more of a direct threat to just let it go or you're going to lose stuff?
Yeah, so I guess I can kind of cover 2 parts of this, kind of 2 separate things. Number one would be we're not sure on how or who is behind this one, but somehow my main sponsor, which I can't say who, but my main sponsor that supports me with bikes, that supplies me with my dirt bikes, got contacted and got threatened, their dealership, by bikes from Yamaha, and they came to me, and that's the reason that I ended the claim, was because of that main sponsor. Not because of them, but because of like the threats and like the things that people were saying to them about their dealership. And to answer the other part of that question would be, Donnie said, is there anything I can do to help you guys out? And we ended up agreeing on 2 crate motors, and I get to go to the goat farm to ride a factory bike. But as of right now, we haven't heard from Donnie in, I think, 2 or 3 days. So I'm not sure if that is still an agreement or not, but he shook my dad's hand on it and told him that he would make sure that would happen. So as of right now, we haven't heard from him in a few days. So.
Okay. Yeah, I know similar. We've been trying to get a hold of him for interview. I know he is back at Loretta's this week they had the final round of the ATV National, so I believe he's been down there, because I know myself and a few other people have tried to contact him, and that was the official word we were given from Yamaha, is that, hey, he is down there for the week. There won't be much of a chance to get a hold of him. So trying to think where we were going to follow up from there, but so from your dealer, so just kind of listening back to what you said with Tyler, and it's just something I wanted to clear up to make sure that, this was comes across as clear as possible. So when you were talking to Tyler, the conversation shifted from, you were talking about Walker calling your sponsors, and then what you had said in the moment was, I believe, here's what I think, and I'm not going to say I'm saying this word for word, I may have my wording wrong. I believe what you said was something along the lines of, I believe, or I think what has happened is, you were talking about, either Luce or somebody at Yamaha called somebody Yamaha corporate, and then Yamaha Canada, and then your dealer. What I was curious to clear up was, when your dealer sponsor called you and basically stated that he was under pressure, did he directly state that he had been threatened to have his franchise pulled? Did he say directly that he'd been threatened by Yamaha, or was he a bit more vague, just like, this is not going to end well for me? If you can, kind of expand upon that in some way. We were just curious, like, how, because I think that's a huge part of people are trying to figure out, like, how badly were these threats boasted against him? How were they termed? How were those threats conveyed to you? What information were you given in that moment?
Yeah, so it was kind of more like, hey, this is a lot more serious than you guys and myself think. This has caught fire really quick. It's going up the chain, and we need to shut this down now. And pretty much it's not good, and it's not going in a good direction, and it won't be good for him or myself. So that was kind of when they kind of made us realize how serious it was, and him being a huge supporter for me for the last 3 years. I didn't want to screw him over, so I respected what he had in mind and what he was told. So that's when I took the claim back.
Okay. This is jumping back a little bit, but this is kind of as we're following this timeline. So you guys had that conversation. You left the meeting with Matt Walker and Luce, and as we've already covered, you're still waiting to connect with Donnie Luce further. Have you? I think you mentioned in your review that you have basically been at Matt Walker's for a good chunk of 3 years. Have you spoken to him at all since then, or is communication totally ended with Walker?
Yeah, I've been with Matt for the last 3.5 years at MotoX. A loyal rider going back. I've never gone to anywhere else. I haven't talked to him since that night. And, I'm not sure what's on there, but I don't plan on going back. Okay.
And then the last piece from that conversation, this is something more or less just from my personal experience I wanted to touch on that it kind of follows the storyline. So I noticed, I remember at one point you mentioned about Luce saying, like, you guys wouldn't be able to service the engine. So I've seen a lot of people commenting about, like, at what state Deegan was running of an engine. And something I just wanted to touch on is whether it was a pro or an AM motor. From everything I'm aware, the amateur motor still has parts in it that are ordered custom, whether it be piston, rod, cams. Not to state or try to put any definitive claim that they were running an AM, a pro, or somewhere in between. Regardless of what engine spec they ran at that race, there are parts in it that would technically be deemed unserviceable because you would have to have the ability to order them from their suppliers. Just to clear up for people that wonder if they run GYTR stuff on AM stuff, or if they have an AM spec motor or pro spec motor. That was just something I had noticed come up with what Luce said. And it's very common because I know there's been, I don't know if anybody's ever gone as far with it as you have. I do know there was a push to claim another amateur factory programs bike. I believe it was a Geico 150 a few years back, and that was a conversation that actually ended up happening between the team and the person that was talking about doing the claim was, hey, there's stuff in here like you can ride for 10 hours, it'll probably blow up, and you can't buy the parts. So that was just something interesting I kind of wanted to touch on. It is very it is a very unusual situation, but that's part of it. A lot of people also claim, because there's the rumor flying around, you touched on this very well with Tyler, was people were like, oh, in a sense, some people were saying that the Deegans directly cheated on the bike without knowing the knowledge of exactly which motor spec was in the bike, regardless if it was AM, Pro, anything there. That rule at Loretta's that you enacted by a claim rule is just that's the cost that you can buy somebody's bike. That doesn't mean the bike has to be worth under or above that. So I believe what you said is the reason you claimed the bike is not that you thought they were cheating, or otherwise you could have filed a protest. It was just, again, you explained it really well that, on your interview with Tyler, that your opinion was just like, hey, it's for the cost, it's a really good value for me to get the opportunity to try a factory bike. It was something that you wanted to do personally. But again, clearing that up from what you said before, you were saying the main reason you went through it is more the value than the fact that you thought that they were cheating.
The first thing was what Donnie had said to us was like, he was asking, okay, so if you guys are going to get this motor, how and who is going to do the motor work and how are you going to do that? My dad kind of basically just told them, like, that's not really going to be your guys' worry because it's going to be our bike, basically. So my motor guy even shook his hand and said, like, hey, man, like, I'm not here to open your motor up and copy it, or I'm not here to do this or do that. Like, my motor guy was just there. So, yeah, and then he kind of said what you had just said about the motor, you know, might not be able to get all the parts or whatever. And, 100%, I wasn't saying they were cheating or saying it was a pro motor or anything like that. I was just, like you said, I just wanted a factory bike for $17,000. That's a pretty good deal to be able to ride a factory star bike. And that's the only reason I did it, was because I wanted to ride a factory star bike, and kind of just turned into this big deal, I guess. And yeah.
I actually, it's kind of funny. I had this conversation with somebody else in the industry about the claim rule after you enacted it. Is they're like, well, man, maybe somebody should have done the Team Green one, because even though I'm pretty aware from talking to Holiday, like, and even their mechanics, like, there's definitely a difference between their AM and Pro bike. But even at that, that PC bike, that Rider D. Oh, sorry, did I break up?
No, you're good.
Hello. There we go. Oh, I was saying is, like, even the bike Rider D was riding, for instance, Chris Kiefer and his son got to do a test on that spec bike a couple months ago, and the retail value of that bike, if you were Joe Blow customer, you walk in that PC and go, I want that. I believe it was around $40,000 was their full retail on all those parts combined. So, like I said, in a sense, definitely a bargain deal when we're talking about less than half the price to build that bike. And then again with the Star one, just from me visually looking, there are some visual differences I can tell between the bike and the Pro bike, but regardless of that, that is still a bike that has a lot of intellectual property, a lot of development time in it. It's easy to name maybe a hard cost parts on it, but there's a lot of money gone development. So yes, at the end of the day, that's why the claim rule exists, is it's meant to ward off teams bringing stuff to a race they're not willing to lose. And ultimately, like I said, people thought they were cheating. There would be a protest. This is more or less, the bike was within the rule book as far as we can tell. Ultimately, never got opened up, so that can't be confirmed. But more the thing is, really on this end, is they brought something to the race that they were clearly uncomfortable with losing for the price.
Yeah, exactly. And even if it's not a pro bike, it's still a really good, solid, fast bike. You know?
Still probably better than what a lot of guys are. Still probably, even though it's an AM spec bike, still probably a lot better than most guys are racing pro on.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the last things, I guess, touch on a story. So I believe it was all in the same evening. So you filed that protest kind of towards the mid-afternoon after your moto. That night is when you went ahead and, I shouldn't say protest. So you filed your claim after your moto, which was around a mid-afternoon. You ended up releasing your claim, per se, that late that evening, correct? It was all
I believe it was evening. Like 9:30. Yeah. It was that same night. It was around like 9:30, I would say, 9:30.
Yeah. So when you went back to the office and decided to inform them that you were going to release the claim on the motorcycle after all the conversations and the pressure and other things that had been placed against you guys, what exactly was told to Cotter when he said, are you releasing this? I know in the conversation you had with Tyler, I believe you said that it wasn't your choice, but you were doing it. Were those the words you used, or in the moment with the pressure, did you just say it is my choice, or did you verbally confirm to them like that there was did you give some notice that there was pressure on you?
No, I told them straight up. I said that if it was completely my choice and I'd be leaving with that bike tomorrow, that's why I came here with my money. That's why I work for my money, and that's what I want to do. But I told them that it's not really, I'm kind of in a corner is what I said. I was kind of pushed up against the corner and I had no way out. So I said that I'm going to have to take my money back and let go of the claim due to some reasons with sponsors. So, yeah, but they did tell me, like, it's completely up to you and everything like that. So I understood that. And, yeah, I just did it out of respect for my sponsor.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now kind of moving, Loretta's all that said and done. After you released the claim on the bike, did anyone from those original parties ever reapproach you, like, thank you, say they were going to do anything else for you, whether it be Deegan's, Luce, anybody from Star? Did anybody communicate anything with you after you released the claim outside of the AMA officials?
Yeah, so I haven't talked to anybody except for Donnie, but like I said, I haven't heard from Donnie in 2 to 3 days, but you said that he's at Loretta, so I understand that.
Yep.
But I haven't talked to anybody as far as that side of people.
Okay. Since this whole situation has gone down, like I said, you guys are currently driving back from Walton based on the communication me and you had yesterday. So since all this, like you said, you released the claim. It looked like initially that, okay, yeah, it wasn't the outcome you wanted, but ultimately things would either clear off, you would still have your help, you might be getting some motors, couple things. Since then, it sounds like your support has been basically taken away from you anyways, correct? You had to end up turning back your bikes, and you currently don't have anything to ride?
Yeah, that's correct. That was just within the last 48 hours that happened, and we're not clear on why or anything like that. And like I said before, I can't say the sponsor's name, yeah. But yeah, I have no bikes to ride right now.
It's only been 48 hours, so do you have any plan you've been able to come up with so far? What do you think will be next for you?
Yeah, I'm not sure as far as that, but I'm just a kid that wants to ride dirt bikes because I love riding dirt bikes. So my parents are really supportive, so they're going to do their best to get me a bike as soon as possible. We're not sure what brand we're going to go with or who or anything like that, but we're going to try and figure that out within the next week.
Was your bike support the only thing that was pulled as a consequence from this interaction? Have any other sponsors per se or any other supporters cut ties with you, or was it only the bike situation?
Yeah, it was only the bike situation. Yeah.
Okay, so your other core people are still supportive. Nobody else has backed out. Okay.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, except for Moto X, I guess.
Yes. With what's happened just in the past couple days and the story coming out, have you received any sort of, I'm guessing, of course, just comments on social media and stuff, you've probably received good, bad, anything from the above in terms of comments, but directly, have you received any form of support beyond comments from anybody in the industry, anybody that wants to step up, it sounds like, to help you because of you coming forward, or has that led to anything yet, or has there been any positive that's come out of the negative of this for you?
I mean, there's always positives that come out of things, I believe, and everything happens for a reason. So, but as of right now, I mean, obviously you have those people that are huge Deegan fans and they're going to hate on anybody no matter what they do to him. So, I mean, there's haters.
Yep.
And then there's also, I'm actually surprised, there's a huge, I'm gaining a huge fan base, I guess you could say, of people that are supportive and supporting me. And a lot of DM messages, a lot of texts, a lot of calls, a lot of emails, a lot of comments, good and bad, but I only look at the supportive stuff and the good things. I don't really pay attention to all the people that are going to hate on things. I mean, you're always going to have those people. But I've had friends that have texted me saying, like, hey, man, like, if you need a bike to ride, you can ride one of my bikes or anything like that. So as far as that goes, yeah, it's just been, like, close friends that have reached out and said, like, hey, you can ride my bike if you need one. I've had a couple people that I've never even met before actually tell me, like, hey, if you need a bike, I got a bike. If you need this, need that. Like, it's been really good that way and everything. But as far as, like, sponsors and stuff like that, no, not really.
Okay. At the end of this whole experience, somebody comes up to you and asks you, who in your eyes do you feel like, because as your initial story came out, there's been a lot of people that are pointing fingers at who they feel like is most at fault for the situation turning out the way it did, whether there's people that want to blame Tim Cotter directly, they want to blame MX Sports, they want to blame AMA, they want to blame Yamaha, they want to blame Star, the Deegans directly, other things of that nature. If somebody were to come up and ask you, who do you feel like turned this situation the most wrong for you, what would be your answer?
Yeah, that's a big question.
It is a lot of people involved. Like I said, ultimately, at the end of the day, there's kind of a blame pie. Like in any situations, it's not just one. I guess what we're trying to say is we're not saying just one person created this whole negative situation for you. Definitely, everybody's interaction plays a part in it. But I guess for you, like who for in your personal opinion holds the biggest part of the blame pie? Again, I think we both agree talking. It's like it's spread across multiple people. It's not just all one. But from your perspective, who do you feel like played the biggest part in this?
Instead of pointing fingers at one person, I would say it was kind of like started wrong when I was put in a room by myself with Brian Deegan and Tim Cotter, and then the next thing would have been the sitting with Donnie, Luce, and Matt Walker. Matt Walker shouldn't have been a part of it at all, I feel like. He had no reason to be. And then kind of the whole pressure threat, wherever that came out of, which we still aren't sure kind of where the whole threats and pressure came out of to my sponsor. But I feel like it was just kind of like handled poorly with everybody except for AMA. AMA was just like good about it and helped me. And
a lot of people have also questioned this. Of course, you were 17, so you're technically a minor. At any point during this, did like these interactions you had with these adults, did you personally feel okay that you were the minor in the room dealing with them? Was there any point you asked for your dad to be involved when some of these people have approached you? Did you feel like at any point you were not allowed that option, or?
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and, like be like play the little kid card or anything like that, but I'm the youngest one in that whole room, and I was just like kind of like told like, hey, come in this room, Brian Deegan sitting here and Tim Cotter, have a talk with them. And they never really asked me like, hey, where's your dad or anything like that. I was just kind of put in the room, and I was just like, well, this is my decision to be doing the claim. Like, it was my decision to go up there and do the claim. So I guess I kind of put myself in that position, but I was also just kind of thrown in a room with two guys asking me questions.
Okay. I guess that really clears up everything I kind of had written down after listening to the story. Leaving your neck of the woods, is there anything else that you want to clear up or tell anybody, or just kind of a ending message for this interview? Anything you're interested in sharing?
Well, really just that I think what people are kind of, I've seen a lot of comments saying like, oh, this kid just wanted to buy Deegan's bike or steal Deegan's bike because he thinks it's going to make him better or faster, or that anything like that. Again, the only reason I did it was because who doesn't want to ride a factory bike, and for that kind of money to get a factory bike, to own a factory bike is a pretty good deal. And I mean, that's the story, I guess.
Well, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate answering all the questions we had, and hopefully for anybody listening, this ends up clearing up anything else, and hopefully we assisted in that. And again, thank you very much for your time, Brennan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate everything, and getting the story clear and straight out there.
Hey, this is Mike Lindsay from Vital MX, and I am here with Tim Cotter of MX Sports. Tim, I can imagine, has been a very busy week. Thank you very much for taking your time to talk to us. Before we jump into really the timeline questions I have about the Deegan bike claim story, I figured there was two main items we would talk about first. The first one is, basically for those that don't know, want to figure out what your position exactly is with MX Sports and in relation to Loretta Lynn's, and give people a background of how you're involved in the event and kind of what your duties are.
Sure. I'm the event director at Loretta Lynn's and the administrator for all things MX Sports, in particular the Amateur National Motocross Championships. I've been involved with the event since its inception in 1982, and act as the part of the leadership team for the event.
And then the next thing we'll kind of talk about is for people that don't fully understand this bike claim rule and the process in which it works. I was curious from your end and how you typically are involved in this. How is a bike claim supposed to be proceeded between yourself, the AMA, all that? In the case of somebody wanting to claim a bike, how does it sort of work?
Yeah, well, if you were going to claim a bike, you would come to the organizer, us, and say, give us what you want to do. Well, I'm going to claim the bike. In this case, they actually went to the impound area and spoke to one of our officials down there and said they were going to do that. They wanted their intent, and they sent them up to our office to speak to our administration up there. And they came in, told us what they were going to do. That's when I got a call on the radio to come in, and the team informed me what was going on and that the gentleman was sitting outside to go talk to him. So that's normally how it would work. Something this serious, I would get involved. I get involved pretty much in all of the officiating issues at Loretta's. We rule by committee. There's a lot of people that are involved in the different aspects of operating that race. So that's typically how it would work.
So for those that have wondered, I've seen a lot of questions in relation to why the process ends up going to yourself or through MX Sports instead of directly with AMA. Can you explain to us how you guys work together at this event? Why the claim process, does it always go to you? Is it supposed to go to AMA, or is it just whoever's available? Or can you break that down?
No, it would always go to the organizer who has an officiating team. We're sanctioned by the AMA, and we have officials. I'm of one of many officials that we have there. And then the AMA, because it's the national championship, they have their management team there as well. So it's sort of the best of both worlds when you're at Loretta's. If this would have happened at a regional, or it would have happened at an area qualifier, or any AMA race for that matter, it's the organizer that's going to receive the claim or receive the request and then act on it.
Okay. So I think there's a couple questions I still have about how it works, but it plays a little more into the timeline. So we will jump into kind of what I have from notes from some of the interviews we've done so far and try to kind of break this down on a timeline sense. So from what you said, what was the first notice that you knew this was happening? Was it, I know you said they, when we were using an example, was it just Brennan that came to the trailer? Was it a group? How did this situation start from your perspective?
Mr. Brennan and I believe it's his engine builder approached our officials that were at the cool down zone or the impound area at the race and told us their intent. They immediately sent them up to our office, the trackside office there at Loretta Lynn's. They came in and told our administration team what they wanted to do. And so I got called and I came to the building or the trailer, and they told me what was going on and that Mr. Schofield was sitting outside with another gentleman. And so I went outside and I said, what's up? And they made it clear that they wanted to claim that motorcycle. The engine builder was there. He did most of the talking. He was a bit aggressive.
And I guess I'll just clear it up when we're referring to the engine builder's name, I know at least, is Derek Harris. So just for anybody listening to the interview. Yeah,
I don't know who he is. I don't know that I'd ever met him. and so I asked, are you the father? Who are you? And he goes, well, I'm the engine builder. And I said, well, then you really don't have a part in this. Mr. Schofield, Brennan was there, and we stepped in. I said, well, let's go inside the trailer. We went in. He said, I want to claim the motorcycle. And we said, that's okay. We looked up the MSRP, Googled it, and it was ×2. He handed us a bank bag of money. We counted it. He had enough money there. So that's when we contacted our team. John Knox is our security director, and we sent him to the Deegan pit to chaperone the bike. And that's when we let the Deegans know that their bike was being claimed.
So the actual interaction, the initial interaction, so you're saying in this case that the engine builder, Derek Harris, was the one that was first verbally, we're making the claim. It was not Schofield that was initially the one that spoke to you?
Well, they were together. Absolutely, they were together. And whether it was Brennan that spoke to me first or the engine builder, I'm not sure who spoke first, but there was no question the engine builder was the guy doing all the talking. He was a bit aggressive. And I just said, well, just hold on a minute. Who are you first? And he was not the parent. And, he was not the racer, or he wasn't the racer's parent. So I said, well, okay, we don't deal with you. We'll deal with the racer. And Brennan stepped inside the trailer. I'll say this, that, Brennan was always polite. He was always, he knew what he wanted. He knew about the whole process. He'd obviously done his homework. And I think he did everything right.
So I heard, when he came in the office, the bag he had, I was told by another source that when opened up, there was cash and a check inside as well, like somebody's business check.
Yeah, there was a check inside, and we pulled the first thing we did was pull it out, and it was a handwritten check. And we said, well, we don't accept, it has to be certified funds. So we gave him back the check, but we counted the cash, and it was all there, just like it should have been. So there was no issue. It didn't need the check. And we gave him a receipt, and we took custody of the cash and immediately sent our team down to chaperone the motorcycle.
Would you by any chance remember whose name was on the check, or no?
I would not.
Okay.
I think it was blue. Yeah, we didn't even look at it, because once he had the cash, it was no problem, and it didn't play a part in it.
In the case of Brennan being 17 and a minor, is that for you guys, is it always down to the competitor is the one that places the claim as long as they have money regardless of age, or is it usual that the parent or guardian would be, or does it in the rule book, is it really required for them to be there? Or
no, it doesn't. And that's, you bring up a good point, because when I saw Brennan, I wouldn't have thought he was 17. I would have thought he was 18. I don't know that I even really thought about it. He was a polite young man. He was doing everything right. The engine builder told us that his parents were not there at the time, and that was it. With hindsight, I probably should, maybe I should have asked him, well, how old are you? But he was doing everything right. It didn't make any difference how old he was. He had the right to do what he did.
And like you said, he seemed to clearly understand the rules. Wasn't like, how do I do this? He knew.
Oh, there was no question. He was intelligent about the rule. He had read the rule. We had to pull the rule up ourselves. We can't memorize every rule in that book. So we pulled the rule up, and we read it word for word, and he had done everything he had needed to do word for word.
So during the time that you guys sent the AMA officials and security team to go basically inform the Deegans that the bike was being claimed and that it needed to be brought up to impound in some way,
What happened during that time? Did you have much conversation with Brennan? Where was he in versus to where you were during kind of that timeline? About how long did it take for them to come back with the bike?
There was a lot of ifs ands going on there, because typically when you claim a motorcycle, you claim it after the last race.
Yes.
Well, in this case,
it was after their last race together.
It was after their last race together, but the Deegan boy still had a race.
Yes.
And we were unclear whether he was using the same bike or not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we knew we had eyes on that bike, and we weren't concerned that the bike was in jeopardy or anything of that nature. But we had to figure out, does he ride the same bike? That didn't happen right away. And we're not going to claim that motorcycle and just take it from him if he was going to ride it the next day. So that time, we would take custody of the bike, and we would do it just like if it was a protest, a teardown protest that happens midweek.
Mm-hmm.
That's happened before, and you take custody of the bike, and then if they want to work on it, you send a chaperone with the bike. And we had plans to do that. We absolutely had a plan in place that if the Deegans were going to do any work to the bike, that we would seal it up properly, and we would have someone with that bike the whole time.
Mm-hmm. When you guys talk about like if it was a protest midweek, tagging it, so my understanding is you guys or the AMA officials that were in, the ones that went to check the bike and grabbed hold of it, basically custody of it, tagged the engine with heat stamp stickers, so if the engine couldn't be opened up or tampered with without you guys knowing, you guys did everything to basically try to certify this is the condition the bike was in when the claim was made. So if the claim goes through, this is the bike that will be received by the claimee.
Absolutely. And first of all, we owe an obligation to Mr. Schofield, but we also have an obligation to Mr. Deegan, Haiden. Haiden has to be comfortable that he's going to ride a bike the next day,
mm-hmm.
the same bike. And we don't want to do anything to jeopardize his national championship experience as well. And so we have to do that, and we have to be mindful of that. The event didn't just finish at the end of the Schofield Haiden Deegan race. So we had to think through it. You would seal the motorcycle, or the engine would be the first thing. But then, what about the ECU? Well, we can do that. We can seal where the bolts go. We can take the exhaust system and seal it up. And so we all sat down and we talked through what we would do. At any rate, the Deegan team decided that they weren't going to work on the bike that evening, mm-hmm. that they would do any maintenance or any upkeep to that bike the next morning. Mm-hmm. And so they brought it up to our trailer, and they actually put it in my camper. I heard one of the versions was it went to an AMA official's camper. Well, he's right. It went to my camper.
Yeah.
And we locked it up. I have a toy hauler. We rolled it right in the back. I put 2 locks on the back and a lock on the front. And it was in my camper. It was in my custody.
Mm-hmm. During this time, while again waiting for the bike to come up to your camper and stuff, did Mr. Schofield hang around the office till the bike got brought and present? Did he say anything? Did you guys talk? And the last one is, at any point, if you guys were talking, was it ever asked of him why he was doing the claim, or was there any real conversation with him?
Oh yeah, we had asked him why he was doing the claim. They told us from the get-go, he wanted to ride it. Mm-hmm. He wanted to make a YouTube video about it. He wanted to tell that story. Mm-hmm. About it. He was very clear what he wanted to do with it, and it doesn't make any difference. He can do whatever he wants with it. He could buy it, and he can do whatever he wants with it. It didn't make any difference.
At what point did Brian Deegan become present? Because after talking to Mr.
Schofield,
that's a point of his, is that Brian somehow got in the room with him to talk with him. Was Brian up there? Did he make his way in? How that's...
No, Brian walked up. Obviously he would, and I would expect him to do that. But he came up, and Brennan, myself, and Mike Burkeen were in my office. There's they talk about, we took him in this hidden secret room. There is no secret rooms there. Or if there is, I haven't found them. But I occupy part of that office. I share an office with several people. And by this time, Brennan was in my side of the office, and Brian showed up and said, "Hey, you're taking my bike." And he said, "Can I ask the kid? Can I see the kid or see Mr. Schofield?" Mike Burkeen was there, and I said, "Well, yeah, I guess, I think that's fair. It's his bike." And Brian was very, I think he was very cordial. He asked why,
Mm-hmm.
and Brennan said, "Well, I want to make a video of it."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Okay." He said, "Are you going to defame my family?" And he said, "Absolutely not." He said, "I have a lot of respect for your family." And that was it. It was not, we were in there 3 or 5, 6 minutes, whatever. But it was very cordial. And Mr. Schofield was very polite. Certainly had his story, and it was exactly the way he told me to begin with. And Brian said, "Okay," and he walked out. And it really didn't last, not very, very long, not very long at all. And it was not ugly. It wasn't ugly. And I think that, at this time we were the understanding that we were told the parents weren't here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that just meant the parents weren't at that trailer. They were actually at the venue.
Yeah.
I later met the dad.
Mm-hmm. I guess if I can just clarify, I believe if it's the trailer I'm thinking of, I believe it's kind of like a single mobile trailer. I believe it has 2 or 3 rooms, and probably the main room is like where all the flaggers are, radios. So there's a lot of people in there. So the room that you guys spoke in was basically, like you said, your shared office. And to clarify what you said, it was yourself, Brian Deegan, Mr. Schofield, and Mike Burkeen, who is the AMA official for the event, correct?
Yeah, he's the I'm not sure, his title's like race director of AMA. He's an AMA employee that was at the event. But yes, and so the office it's a large construction office. It's whatever it is, 60 feet long. And one end of it is I share an office with several folks. The other end is where we do all the race management, the results. That would be your first, like, alternates go into that room. And then the middle room is just a common area that we run the event from.
Okay. So at the point that, at what point did Mr. Schofield leave the office? Was it once you guys received possession of the bike? Did he say anything before leaving? Did any other parties arrive to speak with him or you about the situation, or?
I don't recall when he left, but he did leave. The STAR representatives, I had several conversations with them, and they came up and said, "Well, let's think about what's going to happen tomorrow. When do we do maintenance? What kind of maintenance can we do? Can we change the engine?" And we said, "Well, all of the above is correct. You can change the engine. You can do whatever you want to do, but everything is going to be sealed. And then when your race is over, that all has to be put back together. And that'll be done under tremendous scrutiny and oversight to make sure that Mr. Schofield gets what he bought."
Yes. So basically, from my understanding, in that is that, oh, geez, I just jumped over a menu. I apologize. My understanding was they did end up changing. Well, I guess in America, the claim was wrong, but yeah, so they wanted to change an engine, which I believe they did the next day. But what that meant was the engine that you guys had sealed would have come out of the bike. It had to stay sealed, and it ultimately would have went back in if the claim would have continued.
Yes. Yeah. If had the claim continued, the next morning, if they said, "Okay, we're going to switch the engine," we would have had one of our tech guys there to oversee that. We probably would have taken custody of that engine, and it would have probably gone back up to our area. The Deegans could go ride their race, and when they were done, we would chaperone that thing going back in it to make sure that Schofield got what he paid for.
Mm-hmm. So do you roughly know about what time? Actually, sorry. For who from Star off the top of your head, do you know the names or who was in contact with you from Star Racing?
I don't know his name. I assume he was the head engineer or engine guy or motor guy from Star that was there. I don't know his name.
Mm-hmm. Okay. From there, what was the time in passing before you ran, Mr. Schofield returned? Was there any, before he returned to rescind his claim, was there any other interaction with him or any way, that you were involved with, or did you not speak to him again until he came to rescind his claim?
I don't recall speaking to him after that. We were all in the office. When I say we all, myself, Mike Burkeen, Kerry Russell, were in the office. It was after dark. We were actually getting ready to go to dinner. So the day had completed, and we got a knock at the door from a gentleman that said, we understand that you've claimed Deegan's bike. And I'm thinking, oh, we don't, who are you? And what do you have in this? And he said, I was Mr. Schofield's sponsor, and I don't want this to happen. And I said, well, that's not up to me, but we do have the bike. And he left, and I assume that's when he went to see Mr. Schofield, the Schofield family.
And then, so after that, your next interaction was when Mr. Schofield returned to rescind his claim.
Yeah, that was probably 15, 20 minutes later, when they came back, and they came in the office, and they all sat down. And this time it was the first time that I'd met Brennan's dad. It's my understanding that some of those folks, maybe Burkeen and maybe Kerry, had met Brennan's dad prior to that, but I had not met Brennan's dad at that time. But they all came in, and they said, we would like to withdraw the claim. And room got pretty quiet, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And I looked at Brennan, and I said, Brennan, you have done everything right. You made your claim. You had the money. You have done everything right. And I want to make sure that this is your decision, and this is all on you. And he said, nope, I'm good. I don't want to claim the motorcycle. And at that point in time, we withdrew the claim.
Now, just because I want to make sure that we have this clear, the count in the interview with Tyler that Mr. Schofield has done, and then when I personally spoke to him, he claims when he came in the office that when asked about rescinding his claim, before saying yes, he claims that he said that it's not really my choice, but I'm going to rescind the claim. Do you remember any wording of that manner? Anything that would point to you that he sounds like he may have been regretful or in any way being persuaded against it?
I don't recall him saying it that way. But I did ask him, is this your choice? And Dad was there as well. And Dad was like, nope, we don't want to do this.
So this was your first interaction with his father was present. Right?
It was my first interaction with his father. In fact, I was surprised when Dad, who's this guy? Well, this is Dad. And I thought, whoa.
Dad exists.
The last I heard, Dad wasn't here. Well, Dad was at the venue. He just wasn't there when they claimed the bike. And I remember I'm doing a lot of things. So I'm in and out. Not to say I believe Mr. Schofield, Brennan's dad, had stopped by the trailer and did speak to Kerry Russell. And I wasn't aware of that. So I was actually surprised when Dad walked in. Seemed like a nice enough guy. Typical moto family. They work hard, and they live this sport.
Did other than saying that no, we don't want to go through with this claim, did his father have any other words that he shared or anything that he spoke to you about?
Not that I recall.
Okay. So from that moment on, when a claim I'm guessing is rescinded, they're given their money back, and then the Deegan camp, Star Camp, is basically notified that the bike is eligible to be returned to their hands.
Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
From this point on through the final day of the event, was there any per se scuttlebutt or anything you were hearing from people about the situation? Did you hear any later comments from anybody about the claim, about interactions in the pits between people, anything that you heard or were brought to your attention?
Well, there was talk about it's just going to get claimed again.
Mm-hmm.
Whether someone else will claim it after
Mm-hmm.
Hayden's final moto. Apparently that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
There was some conversation about some harassment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether that happened or didn't happen. It's a big place and there's a lot of people there.
Mm-hmm. What is in the terms of the rule itself about being circumvented, what is your personal interpretation of if somebody outside your guys' group, whether it was Yamaha or other things that Brennan has claimed, if somebody were to have coerced him into basically rescinding his claim, um, is there any real penalty against that at the race or anything? Or in your guys' senses, or anything you can really do about it if somebody is coerced into releasing those claims?
I'd have to read the rule. There's some teeth in there about claiming the bike. It was actually, and Mike Burkeen can better tell you about that rule. I think the teeth in that rule was actually more about trying to protect your bike with other riders. If you had a bike that was going to be claimed, you'd get 10 of your buddies to also counterclaim it. I think that is the spirit of that rule.
Okay.
But Mike Burkeen can probably talk better on that.
Okay. Yes, it will be for anybody ends up watching this one, they'll all get released at the same time, but Burkeen is amongst one of the people that will be interviewed. Yeah, in relation to this, a lot of it will be with him with the rule. I guess the last thing I wanted to talk to you about in sense of the claim is, in your past experience at Loretta's, how often does something like this actually happen? How many people actually say they're going to do it? How many people ever actually come to the office and at least inquire or bring money? Does this happen more often than we realize and people back out, or is this rare? In the past 20 years or so, I know we all kind of know about the Alessi one. Has it really ever come up any other time?
Well, I think they claimed Cincerillo's bike at one time. The Alessi claim, I'm not even sure if that happened at Loretta's. It's not something that happens very often.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think Adam Chatfield claim Alessi's bike?
Yes. 2003, Alessi's final super mini, as far as I aware, it was at Loretta's, because I think he raced it at Minios. That's the only successful one that I was aware of. I had heard rumors over the year about the AC and potentially one, maybe like a threat of one to a Geico bike one time, but I was just curious, like how often you guys, if people really ever come in the office, if there's a mini dad a year that's a threat, or
it's very seldom. And the claiming rule, I think, is a great rule.
Mm-hmm.
One would argue that it's way, past its time, but I disagree. I think that it keeps a more level playing field. I like the rule. I think it should remain. I'm on the AMA Motocross Commission, which is the rules making body, and we have a meeting. I believe it's tomorrow night, Tuesday night rather, and I'm sure there'll be some discussions about that. But I think that it is a good rule.
Okay. I have two last questions for you, sir. One is, after, retrospective of this whole situation, I do know you said earlier that maybe one thought was, if you would have realized at the moment is talking to Brennan about his age. Looking back at it, dealing with Brennan, is there anything that you personally look back on and go, maybe I would have handled this differently? Or from your standpoint, are you satisfied with, the handling of the situation and your interactions with Mr. Schofield?
I think with hindsight, you'd always do something a little different. I mean, I look at every event and say, how would I do this or how would I do that? And if you had the crystal ball to know how it all unfolded, I might do it a little differently. I probably should have asked how old Mr. Brennan was and maybe made sure that he had a parent with him when this whole thing began. Mm-hmm. I think I would probably do that. Other than that, I don't know that I would change anything. I'm a bit disappointed. I try not to read into what the internet says. No offense to your website.
Good.
But I've been our company and myself have been beat up quite a bit over it. Over people that weren't even there, that people that really don't know what's going on. I have made it my life's work. I'm 41 years into this event, and I started working in motocross in 1977, and that should not give me a pass by no means. I think it's important. The only thing I have is integrity. That's really the only value that you really have in life, right? And so it is unfortunate that some people take some liberties and say things that aren't true, and I'm disappointed in that. But I don't know that I would change a whole lot in this. I probably will ask. I don't care if you're in the plus 50 class. I'm probably going to ask your age. Moving forward. But I think that my biggest disappointment in this whole thing are the personal attacks that are made on myself and the company that I work for. And I think that the hardworking men and women that work for MX Sports that are still there today, by the way, just finished up the ATV National there today. They deserve better. And I just, I know it's not a perfect world, but I'm not happy about some of the accusations that are just unfounded from people that weren't even there, and the people that don't have to give up sources, that I have a source. I think that that's wrong. I think Mr. Schofield did everything right. And it was his right to claim that bike, and it was his right not to claim that bike. And he chose both. He chose to claim it, and then he chose not to claim it. And he had every right to do that.
Last one before we part for the evening, sir. In what you have read or have heard, is there any other items that you would like to give your perspective on from the events that have been mentioned? Is there anything else you would like to clear over?
No, I think that I've spoken to you of everything that I was involved with, that I know about, and I'm not going to go into what I think happened. I think that's where the problem comes, is when people theorize of what actually happened. I can tell you what happened when I was in the room, and I can tell you what happened when I was involved. But we'll let someone else tell you what happened when I wasn't in the room or wasn't involved. And hopefully you can patch all these pieces together and it can all be cleared up. But again, I just think that there's a lot of things that have been said that aren't true. I mean, I think I've told you some things that are true, that when you go back and look at other people's interviews, they spoke differently. And they were people that weren't there. I think when you hear from Brennan, and when you hear from Michael Burkeen, myself, Brian Deegan was involved for about 5 minutes. So I don't know what he's going to tell you, but he wasn't in the room for very long. So that's pretty much how it is.
Thank you very much for your time, sir.
It's my pleasure.
Hey, this is Michael Lindsay with Vital MX, and I'm here with Mike Burkeen from the AMA. He was one of the officials from the American Motorcycle Association that was on hand during Loretta's and was involved directly with the bike claim of Haiden Deegan's motorcycle and Brennan Schofield. Before we get into it too far, sir, can you please explain to anybody watching this, kind of what your position is with the AMA, what your position is involved in Loretta's and officiating amateur events, kind of what your backstory is there?
Okay. I'm the Deputy Director of Racing for the AMA, also the motocross manager. So what that means is I have direct responsibility for motocross, and then I have other discipline managers that work on the track side and the off-road side, and they report to me as well. So if it has amateur racing's name on it, it ends up on my desk at the end of the day. As far as Loretta's, I'm not the official, the quote unquote referee at Loretta's, but I'm their AMA's representative there. And all of the folks that are there are not, none of them are AMA employees. They all work for the promoter. So when someone says he's the AMA referee, he is, but he's not someone who works directly for the AMA. He works for the promoter and has contracted them as an AMA referee. We have a very small department. I'm a department of 2. So it doesn't really, we can't send tons of people out there. And then at Loretta's, pretty much all the decisions are made by committee. They have Jeff Canfield, Jeremy Holbert, Tim Cotter, Carey, Davey pokes his head in every now and then, and myself generally sit in on any decisions that need to be made. I don't technically have a vote on any of the decisions that are made, because if they were to get appealed, then they would end up on my desk, and it's kind of hard for me to be fair and objective when I was involved in the decision. On something like this, though, the claim, a little bit different, because none of us have been involved in that. I mean, it's kind of weird that the last time we had a claim was 2005, and it was with Cobra, and I actually was Cobra's sales manager at the time. So I was involved in that one right from the get-go. And but it was different than this one. This one, we had a kid who was riding another moto on the bike, and that added complexity for us to figure out how it went.
So in speaking of how a claim would normally be processed, because I believe there is quite a bit of confusion here, especially in the case we did talk to Tim Cotter about this, but we also wanted to get from your side as the AMA representative, because a lot of people are like, why was Tim Cotter even involved in that situation? Why wasn't it 100% AMA? Can you please explain, when somebody wants to claim a bike, kind of what the route of this process is, why MX Sports is involved, what AMA's involvement is when this claim is put into effect?
Okay, so when the claim came down, they went to impound. Derek approached our guy in impound and said they wanted to claim a bike, and then they called me, and I went down there, and they basically told me the same thing. I said, well, who's the rider? And he had Brennan Schofield come over and said, this is going to be the rider that's doing the claim. And we went directly to the AMA trailer. It's the AMA/MX Sports trailer. We both have offices in there. And the MX Sports guys are absolutely going to be involved, because I'm one person. There's a lot of logistics involved in claiming a bike. We have to, one, send a team down to go let the people know the bike's been claimed. And then the fact that he had another moto to ride on the bike, again, that added complexity. All right, we can't just grab this bike and give it to the kid and tell Haiden he's out of luck in his next class where he's 1-1. So we sent 4 people down there to the pit. One security person, the referee, who's Jeff Canfield, myself, and think another guy that's one of our officials, but I can't remember which guy it was. We all went down there. We explained, what was going on to Brian and to Jensen, who's the star Yamaha guy. And, they were visibly concerned about it, mostly because they didn't really understand what was going on. And I had to, step by step explain to them what was going on with the claim and what the ramifications were. And if they didn't give the bike, what would happen. And it never really came up like that. I mean, within minutes, I was on the phone with Jeremy Coker, and he's, said, okay, well, we're just going to have to work through this. And but we need to figure out how to let Haiden ride the bike. And we were like, obviously all about that. We're not going to make it so that he doesn't get to ride the bike. So cutting back from that, I go back to the AMA trailer, and they've counted the money at this point. They've given him a receipt. Brennan's in the far office. We have 3 offices in there. We have like kind of a big open office space in the middle, and then an office on the left end and an office on the right end. And Brennan was in the one down on the left end. Tim Cotter and I were on the one down in the right end, and Brian Deegan walks in. And he says, I'd like to talk to the kid. And we're like, no, Brian, that's not a good idea. And he goes, look, I'm not going to be a jerk. I'm just going to ask him why he's doing it. I said, if you'll commit to me, that's all you're going to do, and he wants to talk to you, I'll do that. So they go get Brennan. They bring him down into the room with me, Tim, and Brian. And Brennan recounted the conversation perfectly on his first video. Brian said, why are you doing this? And Brennan, said, because the rules say that I can, and I want to make a YouTube video. And then Brian said, are you going to try and defame my family? And Brennan defended that really well. He said, no. He said, I love your family. I love what you guys do. I'm a huge fan, but I just want to use this rule to do this and make a YouTube video. And Brian said, are you sure you know what you're doing? And the kid said, yeah. And then Brian left. Like, he ushered out of the room, and that was the last time Brian was involved on our end at all.
So Brennan stated on that he felt that the conversation in that room was around 30 minutes. Tim Cotter told me it was around 3 to 5 minutes. Like I said, clearly the story I've gone from multiple people is it was 4 people in the room. Again, yourself, Tim Cotter, Brian, and Brennan. What is your estimated on the timeline of that conversation about how long it took?
I mean, at the very most 5 minutes, but probably closer to 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those 3 questions were asked, and that was it. And Brennan, again, the kid's articulate, and he gave Brian good responses back. And, Brian didn't get worked up or anything. Obviously, he wasn't happy because it was creating chaos in his life, which is probably already full of chaos. But, if I had to do it over again, I kind of question letting Brian come in the room because of what could have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Brian could have went nuts. He could have started screaming at the kid, but none of that ended up happening. And again, at most 3 minutes, 4 minutes, it was done.
Before we get much farther into it, I wanted to ask a few details about more the initial part of that, of your timeline, sir. So when you were contacted that, hey, they're doing a claim, like I said, one of your AMA officials was actually approached by Derek Harris, which is the Riders Engine builder, not as his father himself. When you initially made contact with them personally for the claim, was it Derek that spoke to you that wanted to do the claim? Was it Brennan that stepped up and did it? Do you have any interaction with both of them or just one of them?
So the initial person that stepped up to both our official and me was Derek. And he said, hey, I'm the guy that talked to you last week on the phone. And we had a conversation the week before, which is not unusual. I get 2 or 3 of those before every major race where, how do I claim a bike? And some of them are, how do I keep my bike from being claimed? And my response is always, don't bring anything that you don't want to get claimed. But most of them are, can you tell me the mechanics of how this works? So I had that conversation with Derek the week before, but then he brought Brennan over, and then Brennan said, I want to claim Haiden Deegan's bike, and we want to, here's the money. He had a bank bag full of money. And so we walked up together, and I asked him where his parents were, and he said they're not here. And I kind of agonized a little bit, like, do I make him go get his parents? Do I wait for his parents? But I kind of had that when he said they're not here, I had the impression that they weren't there at all at the event. And, now that I know the situation, because his father did come up later, now that I know that situation, if I had it to do over, I would have said, well, where are they? And, probably try to get his parents involved before it went any further. It's kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, because if you tell the kid, I won't let you claim the bike without your parents, then everyone goes nuts and says you denied the kid the right to claim, and that's not in the rule book.
And there's the time limit, because I believe it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 30 minutes after the conclusion of a moto to make a claim.
No, it's actually, so they had that wrong a little bit. They meaning Brennan. It's actually 30 minutes after the results are posted.
Okay.
So the results were being posted like right as we were walking up. So they had another half hour.
Okay.
To get it done.
Yeah.
So
I guess what I was saying is, like, I can understand your guys' situation if you feel like the kid's being responsible. Yes. In retrospective, Tim said the same thing. It'd be very easy, to look back at it and go, should have asked for the dad. But at the same time, in the moment, the kid's being very responsible. He verbalizes in some way that makes you think they're not there. But then also, like you said, if you turn him down, you might get flagged for that. And then also I could see is if they had to go find him, they come back, the 30 minutes has subsided, then, that's like, hey, sorry, time limit's up. There's no claim going down if you guys weren't present in that 30-minute time span.
Yeah, and I wanted to be completely transparent about it. I didn't want anything, the last thing we need is for someone to say the AMA wouldn't let this kid claim a bike. And, that's not the way the rule works. And we printed off the rule, we looked at it, and I promise you next year it will say in that rule that you need to be of age or have your parent or guardian with you to do the claim. And that'll take that off the table, but it's not in there today in this year's. So, we really didn't have any choice but to accept it. And Derek kind of wanted to be, I shouldn't say kind of, he really wanted to be in the trailer. And, we asked him, was he the guardian? And when he said no, then that kind of took him out of the conversation.
Yeah. Who, in that situation, once he admitted he wasn't the guardian, who denied him entry per se? Was it yourself or Tim that told him, like, hey,
no, that was Tim.
Okay.
At that point.
Speaking of the rule itself, I believe you had mentioned to me before, you were involved with the creation, I believe, of this rule, correct? What the claim rule is or how it's been defined over time. Yes,
about probably 4 years ago, we made two changes to the rule. In the past, when someone has done it, and we've only had it happen 4 times ever in amateur racing, but people would always be ready and, so-and-so has 5 envelopes that he's going to hand out to predetermined people in the class. So if you claim his bike, they're going to do 5 counterclaims. And then the guy has a 1 in 6 chance of getting it. And that makes people not want to do it, because if they think they don't have a very good chance of winning, now they're that guy and they don't have a great chance to win. So we changed that.
Which really is interesting, because I believe at one point the AMA had a claim rule in pro racing back in the 70s. And that's exactly what would happen. Privateers would claim a factory motorcycle because it was only like $2,000 or $2,500 for 125 class, $3,000 for 250, and like another $500 for the open class at the time. And every OEM would just counterclaim the bike. There'd be 10 of them in the pool, and whoever got it back would hand the motorcycle back. Because that's always been kind of the superstition, I feel like, behind this rule, even at Loretta's, has been, hey, if you claim a bike, it is very likely that other OEMs may step in, because supposedly there is this handshake agreement. But what you were saying, and we'll get into, is that is part of what's kind of been changed with the claim, is that it will form a penalty if people try to just endlessly counterclaim the motorcycle.
Yeah, we did 2 things. One, we added a little caveat that says no further time will be added. So if a guy comes up to the referee at 25 minutes after the results are posted and does his claim, it's going to take 5 minutes to go down and tell them, and then there's no time to do that any longer. And we added, then no time will be added for counterclaims. But then the big kicker that we added, and this was my doing, was that if you're complicit in circumventing the rule by counterclaiming and giving it back to the guy, then you face a year suspension. So what that did is that made all those people that said, sure, I'll take your envelope and be part of this, say, not so much anymore. We're not going to be involved in that, because they don't want to face that year suspension. And that the reason that's important is that, and I don't think it ever came out that they thought that I was against the claim personally, or that the AMA was.
I believe so far, Brennan has been, even when I interviewed him, says he feels like on the AMA side that everything was done as properly as can be and by the rule.
Yeah. But I was in the room for everything that happened, except for the time that I went to get the bike, went to inform them. So I wasn't there, but when I heard then 2 days later that, that Tim was in the room berating him, and then I heard he was in the room with Deegan berating him, I'm like, well, that didn't happen. But Tim or Kerry or no one at MX Sports thought this was a bad thing. Like, we are all like, well, it's about time this happened. They've been doing this for a little while. Some of the teams have been putting motorcycles out there that were probably way more capable than they needed to be. And at some point this was going to happen. And we just looked at each other like, well, it finally happened. And then we went into execution mode. Like, he has to ride the bike in another moto. How do we go about all this? And then we're, just trying to put the plan together. And I know Tim and Derek's, I think their confrontation had to do with how we were going to impound the bike, or what we were going to impound, or how it happened. But at that point, when I walked by, Derek asked me, he's like, hey, they say they're not going to impound the bike. I'm like, well, I looked at him, it's like, well, I'm not going to let that happen. And he goes, yeah, I'm glad you're back here. So we worked through all the ins and outs of how they're going to do it, and how we can make it so Haiden could ride the next day. And he was 1-1 in that class. So, we didn't want to put him at a disadvantage going in, but we wanted to keep the integrity of the claim and not let anything get changed. So we had a former factory Suzuki mechanic, probably our smartest engine guy there, and he was going to watch the bike. He was going to make sure they didn't, hook a laptop or a cell phone up to the ECU, and just make sure that no changes were made at all to the bike.
And I know we've talked to Carl about this, because they were at one point saying that if the claim went forward into the next day, that they were going to possibly change an engine, which actually everybody can visually see by photos. They ran a different engine on the final day of racing. I believe we'll see when we talked to them. The counterclaim was they found metal shavings or something. They wanted to change that motor. They ended up, I believe, borrowing one from the factory AM Yamaha program, is what is. And so far, I want to say speculated, but has been reported to me privately. But either way, what you guys would have done, I believe you guys did do, is you used kind of like the heat stickers went around that whole engine, all the case points, and pretty much marked that engine and the VIN number on it. Like, hey, if you guys have to swap this motor tomorrow, the motor that's in it at the time of the claim will be the one that is back in this bike when it's given to Brennan, correct?
Right. Yeah. So we actually, that was when I got to meet Brennan's dad. We text Brennan and said, hey, we've got an issue and we want to talk to you about it. So we brought them down, and his dad came at that point, and we said, hey, look, there's a chance they want to change the motor for tomorrow. And we introduced the guy that was going to be supervising the whole thing, and they're comfortable with him being the guy that was going to watch everything. And, we basically positioned it to them like, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because now there's no way he can go out there and blow the motor up or, do anything crazy. Not that I'm saying that they would, but the opportunity would no longer be there, and you would get the motor that you had. And they agreed. Like, they're like, yeah, that's a great thing. Just pull that thing out and, keep it an impound, and then we'll take the motor just like it is. And they walked out of the room with a smile on their face. And, we were like, okay, so now it got a little bit harder, because we got to have someone watch the motor swap. But again, we wanted to make sure that Deegan had the opportunity to, do what he needed to do. And they did swap it for one of the Yamaha AM motors, and, went out and won the race. But I mean, at that point, the claim was rescinded that night. And
Yep.
So it really was a moot point then. They just pulled it out and did the swap, and we didn't have to be involved.
So before the claim ended up getting rescinded, you guys had informed the Deegan camp and Star Racing the bike would be claimed. You guys overviewed the service of the bike, brought it into your impound. I know from talking to Tim, it was actually placed in his camper and locked up, which I've heard that story from other claims in the past that it, locked up in one of the officials' campers, so nobody else, it's under the supervision of AMA and MX Sports. But from that timeline on, before Brennan came back and decided to rescind his claim, was there at any point communication with anyone from Deegan's camp or Star along the lines of, how do we get out of this? Is there a way to get around this rule? Were they very much understanding that this bike's going bye-bye, or were they at any point trying to ask questions or verbalize anything amongst why is this happening? Is there a way out of this rule? Are you sure it's being done to the rule, etc.?
Yeah, so I spoke to Jeremy Coker when I went down to impound the bike in the beginning. And of course, they asked that question, like, do we have any outs here? And I basically just said, no, this is what it is, and it's going to happen. And, I said, our goal is to, again, I've said this probably 3 times now, but our goal is to make it so it impacts Haiden in his last moto the least amount. And then, we'll roll it off the podium. And, and the kid was kind of pumped. Brennan was pumped about that, because that's where the YouTube video is going to start, them rolling that bike off the podium and giving it to him. So it looked like everything was on track, and I didn't get a call from anybody. Nobody in my office or in MX Sports got a call at that point from Star that I'm aware of. I definitely didn't, and I don't think anybody else did, because I'm pretty sure I know Jeremy and Jensen pretty well, and I'm pretty sure they probably would have called me as opposed to calling somebody else, and no one did.
Okay. So, and then just to clear up one more thing, we've talked about this pretty much in each interview, but just to make sure people understand, is the reason that the claim was processed when it was, and the fact that Deegan was going to race the bike the next day, is Brennan was only in one class, the same as Deegan. They were both in 250B together, which is the claim was filed after the third 250B moto on Friday. Brennan's other class was 450B, while Deegan's other class was Schoolboy 2. So he still had his final moto of Schoolboy 2 on Saturday, in which he had started Schoolboy 2 with that same bike VIN number. So that bike that was counterclaimed, yes, it was in 250B. Yes, Brennan's racing against Deegan was done for the week, and that class was done, but Deegan had started the week also in that other class on the same motorcycle, correct?
Yeah, that's all correct. And, it's people are saying that the rule says that you have to deliver the bike immediately intact. But I mean, think of the position that puts people in. And every time someone is 1 point behind someone else, they just claim his bike in another class, and that guy didn't get to race his last moto. So we were adamant on all sides that he was going to finish the Schoolboy 2 class and get to run his third moto. And then we would deliver the bike at that point, exactly as it came off the 250B moto.
I don't know if you can comment on this. This one is a little bit of, it's unrelated to the Deegan thing, but just to give people an idea of why the rules were in how it is. I remember hearing, I can't remember how many years ago it was. I feel like it was fairly recent, that a dad in the PW50 class tried to claim a bunch of bikes that beat his kid after the second moto or something, under the premise that the bikes would all be taken off the track or something, so they couldn't race them or something.
I don't recall that happening, but there was a dad that protested the top 6. And so we impounded all of the top 6. I guess what I was thinking of.
Okay, that was,
it was a huge pain, because we had to put like 6 people to go with each one of those guys to prep the bikes, and we had them all impounded in a shed for a day, and then they all went running. And I mean, turns out the guy was pretty good, because I think 4 of them happened to be illegal. So 4, there was an extra one that got thrown in there, but 4 out of the 7 had some things that weren't kosher. So the dad ended up accomplishing what he wanted right up until the point where his bike was deemed to be illegal as well.
Wait, what?
So the dad that did all the protesting was actually a grandfather. His bike turned out, because then all those guys got together and said, well, we're tearing yours down too. And then his bike turned out to be one of the ones that was not legal.
Oh, that's funny.
It just goes to show don't ever trust your engine builder.
So the other thing with this about the ruling and the reason it claimed is Brennan has said this multiple times. I believe Tim said this is what Brennan said. I want to ask you as well. They only ever talked about claiming the bike. There was never a talk of just protesting because they actually did not believe at the time. There was no belief ever verbalized to anyone that they thought the Deegans were actually cheating or that Star was cheating, just that, hey, this rule's in place and there's the opportunity to get this bike for this cost, and that's what the rule says.
Yeah, I think that's completely true, because if they thought it was illegal, they could protest it for $500. And, and then we would know. So, yeah, I think it was all about the claim and all about getting the bike. And I can't say this enough times, which is fine. That's what the rule's there for. And it's there to encourage these upper level teams to just be judicious in how they spend their money. And, even though the claim went south at the end for whatever reason, because I wasn't involved in any of that, the ripple effect is exactly what the rule is intended to do. I promise you Star won't bring and I'm not saying they had a pro level motor, but if it was a pro level motor, I promise they won't do it again. I had conversations with all the other OEMs, and they all said we have to reevaluate what we bring to these races based on the possibility of this happening. And then one guy said we've already adjusted what we bring to these races because we thought someone else's bike was going to get claimed a while back. And so I think it's going to have a really solid effect. I think people are going to bring bikes that, if it gets claimed and you lose $2,000 or $3,000 and it's a pain in the butt, that's one thing. But if it's claimed and you're losing technology that you don't want the world to see, not because it's illegal, but because it's yours, I think that we're probably going down that path right now.
I will say I can't, because it's without a recent conversation, it can't be really said in here as fact, but I think I know which OEM you're speaking of, because I was around during one of their prior conversations last year when they realized the bikes could be claimed, and they're like, we're going to change this. And the said one I'm thinking of, they definitely toned down what they did this year. And even I know a lot of people like to point out the Team Green bikes because of kit suspension, other items, and yes, their bikes are expensive, but Chris Kiefer did a test with his son Aiden on a Team Green spec biker this year, which PC has for sale. It is expensive. Full retail cost of every modification they did, plus the cost of the bike itself, was around $40,000. But in their defense, that's a bike that Team Green and Pro Circuit seem comfortable with losing, because it's all items that can be purchased and serviced at their shop. So I mean, yes, it's pretty hard. I know some people look at it and go, oh, well, the rules cheat if somebody goes above the double MSRP. The rule doesn't state that. That just states how a bike can be claimed. And it's just sort of a suggestion of like, hey, if you're comfortable at, anybody can buy your bike for, double MSRP. So it'd be 16, 17, 18 grand. It depends on the MSRP of the actual OEM motorcycle, but it gives you a guideline of, hey, here's what somebody can claim it for. If you're comfortable losing a $70,000 motorcycle and some intellectual property, then that's on you. That's why the rule is, I think, as open as it is, and it isn't. Like I said, just it's left as a suggestion for these brands to back off. Yeah. Hopefully they do, because of this situation.
I mean, at the end of the day, Haiden went out there and won with, it's just a Yamaha amateur spec mod motor that anyone else could get. He clearly didn't need that to win. And I think they saw that as well when you go out there and you swap motors to something that's probably not quite as good as what you're running, and you still win by 20 seconds. That should tell you that, at that level, the motor's clearly important, but the most important thing is the kid twisting the throttle.
So to kind of finish out the timeline, so you had spoken to Brennan and his father when it came to, hey, Deegan's got a race tomorrow. You guys broke down how that situation was going to be handled. Being this was also, I believe, your first interaction with his father, did he have anything to say to you, because he wasn't involved the first time his son came up? Did he have any questions or anything unique that came up in that conversation?
No, not really. I mean, he was there, and he reiterated the fact that he reiterated the fact that, it was indeed the money that Brennan earned over the summer, and that there wasn't anyone else involved. And, really that conversation was more around the mechanics of what happens if we have an engine swap and the logistics of how to handle that. And I think they left pretty doggone happy about that. I think from listening to their interviews, they're under the impression that they were going to get the mod motor that came out of the bike and get to keep the bike with that motor in it. And I'm not aware that that was the case, but if it was, even more power to them.
Yeah. So was there any other interactions between yourself and Brennan or anybody in his camp up until the point of the rescinded claim? And then were you by any chance present when the claim was rescinded?
So I didn't have any other conversations with them after they left, after we talked about the motor swap. And then when he came back with his father. And, of course, I was in the room for that conversation. And, the first thing Kerry Coombs said was, Brennan, you did nothing wrong here. We want to make sure that you understand that, and that none of us here wants this to go away. This isn't, what we want. We want what you want. And just want to make sure this is your decision. And he did him and haw just a little bit, but he said it was his decision, that's what he wanted to do. And after that, Tim Cotter basically said the same thing. He said, look, we've gone through something that none of us have gone through in the last one was 2005. That's the last time this happened. So none of us have gone through this. And, with him riding the bike in another class, it adds complexity. But again, we don't think you did anything wrong. And you want to go through this, we're on board 100%. And the kid said, no, I'm kind of done. I don't want to do it.
Did you at any point here, so that's Tim basically said that those questions and that he said no, it was his choice. In speaking to Brennan, what he verbalizes as his memory of the situation is that at one point he said, no, it's not really my choice. It's not what I want to do, but I have to, or something along those words. Was there anything that made you, or was there any gestures or anything he did that made you feel like he had been pressured, or was everything that he verbally said confirmation you guys felt like it was of his own choice?
It was kind of hard because you could tell he was a little upset about it. But I didn't know if he was upset about the fact that he wasn't going to get the bike, or if he's upset that it created a big, shitstorm around him. And it was hard for me to tell, but I didn't hear him say it's not my choice, because if I did hear him say that, I would have stepped in and said, well, whose choice is it? I would have clarified that and made sure that, no one on our end was pressuring him. And I know that wasn't the case because I was there for all of those conversations, but also, it would have been interesting to know. And obviously after all the interviews and all the things that have been out now, I kind of have an idea of how it went down. But at the time, at the end of the day, it looked like he wasn't really super happy, but I never heard him say it's not my choice, because we asked him twice, is it, just want to make sure this is your idea, is what you want to do. And he said yes both times. So,
yeah. So as of which, after that time, from the moment that the claim was released, the money was released back to him, the bike was released back to Deegan. Was there any further interactions with Brennan, anyone from his camp, anyone from Yamaha, or anyone from Deegan's camp after the bike was released, or anything that was notable that made you maybe think that things weren't of it, like that maybe something had changed, or that you've been given weird feedback? Was there anything you heard the next day, or any rumblings of anything that had happened?
So I never saw Brennan or his father or Derek again after, and Derek wasn't there when they got the money back. It was Brennan and his dad, and Donnie from Yamaha was standing there. And so we gave the kid the money back, and then I didn't see them again the rest of the weekend. The only interaction that we had with Star at all after that was they had someone sitting in the office while the Schoolboy 2 moto was running, and he had read through the rule book, and he thought if the bike got claimed again that he could appeal it and it would go away if he did it right away. So I sat down in the office with him, and we kind of went over the rule book, and I explained to him what different things meant and what he thought they meant weren't really what they meant. And so he said, I don't have to sit here for half an hour. And I said, no, you don't have to sit there for half an hour. I mean, and I didn't even know the guy's name. I think he was one of the mechanics, but super nice guy. When I explained everything to him, he's like, all right, we're good. And, he went on and left, and I never saw the Deegans or any of those guys. I went pretty much straight to the award ceremony from there, did the award ceremony, and then I hopped in the van, and I was trying to make it back that night, but it didn't happen.
So last two questions I have for you, sir. One is in relation to the rules. So we talked about there is, it would be frowned upon if somehow somebody coerced somebody out of doing this. So we're still kind of digging through this through these interviews. The latest one I've done with Brennan, he claims that and the verbiage is very unclear, but basically at some point he claims that Yamaha offered him 2 crate engines and an opportunity to ride the bike at Goat Farm. And the way he terms it is it was sort of in trade of like, hey, if you were to drop this is sort of what we'll help you with. With the way that rule is written, like we talked about earlier, it's primarily the counter is to people not counterclaim. From your guys' position, AMA, how do you feel about if somebody offers somebody something to drop a claim versus if they were actually threatened in the rumor that Yamaha may have threatened the dealer or something? Is there anything on the AMA side, if there was the ability to confirm that would result in any sort of further action? Could you maybe break that down for us from a rule book standpoint?
Yeah, so unfortunately, there's nothing in the rule book as far as penalties for that kind of action. So I would say that they're 2 completely separate things. If Yamaha came along and said, hey, we really need to get this bike back, we'll give you 5 motorcycles. And the kid said, all right, I'm in, I'm going to go rescind it, drop the bikes off at my camper. I would say more power to the kid for making a good deal on the thing. And I would say that's not something that that Yamaha would have that wouldn't give Yamaha a black eye in the AMA size. Now, on the other side of that, if Yamaha were to threaten to take a dealership's stuff away and, threaten the kid, then that would be an entirely different story. And we've talked about it, about what we would do in that case. And the rule book doesn't really support a whole lot of action, but I mean, it would be a very difficult conversation for someone to have if it turned out to be that way.
Mm-hmm. And with these discussions, do you foresee the rule changing much before next year? Do you think you guys will define certain aspects of it before the 2023 Loretta season? Do you foresee anything maybe changing?
I think the only thing, and we mentioned it before, was that if it's a minor, we need to have a guardian with them. We don't want to go through this again where, the kid's in a room and whether people were aggressive with him or not is neither here nor there. The fact that he's a minor and he's by himself, we'd really like to avoid even just the appearance of that impropriety. So it'll be in there next year that you, if you're not 18, you're going to have a guardian with you. It could be your guardian or your father, and one of those two should be at the racetrack. Otherwise, you shouldn't be racing. So, but other than that, I don't see any change at all. I think it worked exactly like it was supposed to, and I think that we need to probably put a form together, because there was no form. Again, this hasn't happened in 18, 19 years. And so it was a brand new thing for all of us. If it's a protest, we've all done hundreds of those, but this one was brand new to all of us. So we had to work our way through the logistics of it. And next time we'll be a little bit more prepared.
Was the 05 one, was that Cianciarulo Cobra or no?
Yeah, it was Adam Cianciarulo's Cobra, and a guy bought the bike and then he did an expose on all the cheater parts that were in it. So he didn't protest all that stuff. He bought it and then he took it back to his house. And then 2 weeks later, he did this big expose of all the supposed cheater parts on the bike. And it was just kind of one of those things back in the 50 wars were way worse back then than they are now.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as bad today as it was back then, for sure.
Okay, that one's fine. I knew that AC had a bike. I didn't realize it was that long ago. I thought maybe it was during Super Mini days or something.
No.
But,
A funny story about that thing though, Bud Mamoni was the guy, the Cobra guy that started Cobra, and he was still working for Cobra when the other group bought it. But I came back to the pits and I said, "Hey Bud, AC's bike got claimed. Do you want me to get some counterclaims up so we can try and keep it?" And he said, "How much are we getting for it?" And I said, $3,700. He goes, "No, go back and see if they'll claim those other two." So, he didn't really have a whole lot of worry about them getting that bike.
That's funny.
So, yeah.
The last question I have for you, just for the sake of transparency, I know you said earlier you like to be very transparent, and I'm just wanting to clean up a weird little thing I saw. So we had a few members on our forum that as soon as I mentioned that we would be interviewing you, were theorizing crazy stuff as usual. One of them being, they're like, well, his son rides a Yamaha. Your son is racing nationals right now. He's racing the 450 class on a YZ 252 stroke, which it's been a really cool story lately. I believe from talking to him, that motorcycle was purchased from Triangle Cycles. So I just wanted to clear that up for anybody that wants to go down that path or believe that already.
Yeah, and again, in the interest of full transparency, YZ 252 strokes were nearly impossible to get when we were trying to get that. And Rusty Reynolds called Donnie, and Donnie had one that was left over from, it was brand new. It was left over from maybe, I don't know if it was from a press pool or something, but Donnie did help Rusty get the bike because you couldn't find one at the time. But Matt, I want to say Matt, but he hasn't paid me yet. So Mike actually bought the bike, Triangle Cycles, and he's been racing it. He's raced almost all the rounds and almost made them all. And if you saw him last weekend, he went across the finish line with Sexton 2 laps down, but he fist pumped next to Sexton, and it was the most hilarious thing you've ever seen.
And then just to clear up one more thing, you said, there was definitely Donnie helped get the bike to Triangle, but then you have a receipt for full pop.
Yeah, we paid whatever dealer cost is for that bike plus freight and setup, and if anyone wants to see it, I'm sure we have that receipt somewhere.
Okay, cool. Like I said, we're trying to cover there's a lot in this thing to unravel, so we're
absolutely
basis. So I appreciate your time, sir, in answering all of our questions. I actually do have one last thing. Is there anything that you would personally like to say, anything that you feel like having seen interviews that you have a counter opinion on because you were there at the moment, anything that you would like to further share, or do you believe that we covered it all?
Yeah, I think you guys done a great job covering it all, and I think you're talking to all the right people who were in the room and involved in the conversations. The two things I want to reiterate: one, I absolutely positively don't think either Derek or Brennan Schofield did anything wrong throughout the entire claiming process. Everything they did was by the book, and hopefully they feel we did the same thing on their behalf. And I know he's taken a beating, but I don't think Tim Cotter did anything wrong. My interactions with him the entire time, he never, not once did it come up, we got to figure out a way to make this go away. It was, well, this is interesting, let's figure out how to do it. So I think Tim's kind of taken the brunt of the beating because, and I get it, if you think that Tim and Brian Deegan took that kid in a room and locked the door for half an hour, like I would have the exact same, mentality that a lot of the guys on Vital do, but it didn't happen. The conversation was 3 minutes and there was no coercion and there was no, anything like that. So, if you take that part away from the entire story, I think the narrative is completely different because, and what happened, down with the sponsor or Matt or any of those other guys, I wasn't involved in any of that. I don't even have really very good secondhand knowledge of it, but that's kind of on all those guys for figuring that out.
Mhm.
and doing it. If Brennan felt like he, if he was in a spot where, I guess it's just, if I was sponsoring a kid and I thought someone was taking advantage of him, I would probably try to help him. And if I had to lean on him a little bit to help him, then I would. Unfortunately, I'm not in the thing, and I don't think what he did was wrong. I think what he did was absolutely right, and I hope somebody else does it at the next one.
So the fourth and final person that was supposed to be interviewed for this portion of the feature was Brian Deegan. Brian did speak to us and explained quite a bit of his side of things, albeit he was not in a position where he could currently do a Zoom call or any sort of recorded situation. So he passed on his side of it to us and told us to feel free to pass it on to you, the viewer. Main thing that Brian wanted to basically clear up or talk about in our conversation with him was the fact that when he initially went to the AMA or MX Sports trailer after hearing about the claim on Hayden's bike, after being informed by the AMA officials when they came down to take possession of the bike, he went to the trailer to basically learn more about the rule, follow up with the officiators to see what the situation was, how it was going to play out. At that point, he connected with Mike Burkeen, spoke to Burkeen about the situation, and asked if he could talk to the parties that had claimed the motorcycle. At that point, Mike said, as long as you're, and Brian says this, Mike says, as long as you're professional about it. And he said, I just want to ask them why they're doing it. So he was allowed access to the room that Mike Burkeen, Brennan Schofield, and Tim Cotter were in. Brian said that he basically asked two main questions to the kid, and he did say when he got to the room and realized it was just the kid by himself, it was just Brennan, he said it caught him off guard because he expected to find, a rider with his father. So he said just meeting with Brennan kind of caught him off guard. He said he simply asked him, why are you doing this? Why are you claiming the bike? After receiving the first answer for Brennan, which he covers in his interview and Car talks about, Brian followed up with, because there was comments about a possible YouTube video. Brian said he asked, are you trying to defame myself or my family on YouTube? And Brian said, no, that he had no intentions of doing that. Brian basically says goodbyes to that point and left the room. Brian did say he feels like he was only in the room somewhere around 3 or 4 minutes. And then left to basically go back to his camp and start kind of figuring out what was going on with this situation. He said he was aware of Brennan Schofield up until this situation, or at least the name, based on a prior interaction that happened between Haiden and Brennan at a Loretta Lynn's qualifier at Southwick, where they actually had a run-in on track. And Brian did have a couple screenshots of social posts from Brennan that had been sent to him that he had been carrying, that he found quite negative against Haiden. So with that, he was aware of who the rider was that was making the claim once he got there and found out who it was, based on this prior interaction that they had had with him, again, at that qualifier. Other than this, Brian claims that really at no major point did he have any interaction with, your Matt Walker, Donnie, Luce, and many of the other people involved in this story, that pretty much after he left that trailer and up until the point that they were told that the bike had been released later that evening, that he did not have involvement or conversation with any of the other key people that then conversed with Brennan as the night went on. So that concludes some of the statement stuff that we got from Brian. Again, sorry we couldn't get him on for this actual part of it, but we are grateful for his time and at least being able to get a message from him to add into the story and get his perspective or his take on what he feels like happened.